Well, she's coming. She's coming. I am Reverend Gloria Cheney. I am chaplain for the Cleveland Police Department and chaplain for the FBI. I agree. I would like to welcome all of you to the celebration of the life of James Biggar, who entered into eternal rest on October 28th, 2022. I want you to understand Mr. Biggar was my friend. We saw each other twice a year. I had the pleasure of being the chaplain, and so we would go to the fall and the spring dinner. My responsibility as chaplains, we do the invocations and the benedictions with an occasional wedding, funeral, and memorials, with graduation and whenever we're called. So at the very first time I met Mr. Biggar, we came in together. We had a lengthy discussion of, hi, and who are you? And I said to him, I am the chaplain. And so we got to our table. He says, where are you sitting? I said, I'm sitting over there. He said, well, that's where I'm sitting too. And then he managed to tell everybody at the table, finally, somebody at the table interesting. So every time I was there, he would find me and we would catch up. So if you don't mind, allow me to comfort you this afternoon as best I can. Thank you, family, for allowing me this privilege. My brothers and sisters, I want to get started with you with some reflections from John O'Donoghue. He was a contemporary Irish priest, poet, author, and philosopher who spent much of his life studying spirituality. His inspired words have brought comfort to many over the years. The author of 20 plus books and a native Irish speaker. Poet O'Donoghue declares, the dead are not distant or absent. They are alongside us. When we lose someone to death, we lose their physical image and presence. They slip out of viable form into invisible presence. This alteration of form is the reason we cannot see the dead. He continues, but because we cannot see them does not mean they are not there. Transfigured into eternal form, the dead cannot reverse the journey and even for 1 second re-enter their old form to linger with us for a while. He continues, he says, though they cannot reappear, they continue to be near, and part of the healing of grief is the refinement of our hearts, whereby we come to sense their loving nearness. When we enter ourselves into the eternal world and come to see our lives on earth in full view, we may be surprised at the immense assistance and support for which our departed loved ones have accompanied every moment of our lives. And then he concludes, in their new transfigured presence, their compassion, their understanding and love take on a divine depth, enabling them to become secret angels and sheltering the unfolding of our destiny, end quote. Will you join me in prayer? Gracious God, we gather today for a celebration of life. Oh God, your holy text assured us to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. But truth be told, oh God, we acknowledge, even though we love you, we know you, we trust you and desire to be like you, oh God, sometimes life has the ability to lacerate. So God, we come collectively in this room. We're going to lean on each other to attempt to roam through this situation called the grief process. Please, oh God, grant strength, order our steps, allow peace in the midst of this tempest, and we will still, through tears, through hearts that may be breaking, give you the praise, the honor, and the glory. In your name we pray. Amen.
Hello, and thank you for being here today to celebrate such an amazing man. My name is Megan Biggar Fulton, and I'm one of Jim's 11 grandchildren and the mother of 3 of his 16 great grandchildren. Today, I want to share a few words about Jim Biggar as a grandfather and a great grandfather. As I reflect on his life and what he taught me, I learned a lot from him. I think we all did. And I always valued and appreciated his thoughtful advice, but I think I learned the most from him in how he lived his life. He prioritized his relationships, and his family was the center of his life. He also treated people with respect and made you feel like the most important person in the room. To many people, Jim was a successful businessman and a leader in Cleveland, but to his grandchildren, he was Grandpa Jim. He was warm, funny, wise, and he had a jolly and contagious laugh. When we were little, he was always a part of the action, swimming in the pond, ice skating, and skiing. He was always a part of it all. But as we got older, he showed his love through his presence, whether it was being there on the sidelines of my field hockey and lacrosse games, attending birthdays, weddings, holidays, sending us birthday cards, and lunch dates when we were home from college, and visits to our respective cities. I knew I could always count on seeing his face across the table. He was present and supportive and always offered thoughtful advice, and he always gave a giant bear hug when he said goodbye. And he was proud of us, and he made sure we knew that. He used to tell me I was a great gal, and even said those words to me in his final hours as he said goodbye. His special relationship with his grandchildren then extended to his great grandchildren as well, which is truly unique. All of our kids really loved him. They loved digging in the sand at his pond, running through the sprinkler in his backyard, and eating ice cream from his freezer. George and Henry, my 4 and 2-year-olds, were there in his final hours, and George quietly held his hand to say goodbye. And when I told my 6-year-old daughter of his passing, she was so upset and sad. But after a few days of processing, she told me, "I'm so sad about Grandpa Jim, and I'm going to miss him so much. But I bet he gave Grandy 1,000 kisses when he saw her." His relationship with his grandchildren and his great grandchildren was indicative of the kind of person he was and the kind of family man he was. His relationship with his kids, brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, grandchildren demonstrated how family was his priority. But his most important relationship of all was with his wife, Margie, known as Grandy to us. He showed us all what a marriage could be and what it means to love your partner unconditionally. His devotion to her certainly shaped my thoughts about marriage. And even as his mind started to fade a bit, his memories with her and their life together were crystal clear, and we always knew what an important role she played in his life. Grandpa Jim was the pillar of our family. His values and lessons were the foundation and set the tone for how I wanted to raise my own family. He will certainly be missed. I'll miss his laugh, his hugs, his warmth, but we all feel so lucky to have had him in our lives for so many years. He was truly one of a kind, and his legacy will live on in all of us. As I reflect on his life, I can only hope to live a life as great as he did. It was truly a life well lived with a lot of love.
Hello, I'm Sarah Biggar Kalansky, Megan's younger sister and another of Grandpa's grandchildren. I guess I too have three of the 16 great grandchildren too. Everyone here knows Jim Biggar in different ways and from different times in his life. I have 4 things that I got from Grandpa Jim that I will carry with me all my life that I wanted to share with you today. Sorry, I'm more of a crier. The first is golf. I learned golf at a young age and really loved it because it was quality time that I got to spend with my dad and grandpa. I was the only grandchild in town who liked to golf, so it was very special for me. Playing golf with them meant not only enjoying a round, but having great conversations and being entertained by Grandpa's endless stories from golf and from life. I'll never forget the way that he lined up the ball, swaying his hips back and forth. Hang on. Swaying his hips back and forth, uh, and the club back and forth, and his dramatic swing. I had the privilege to play with him all over the world, but more importantly, I had the opportunity to experience his passion for the sport and why he loved it. The art of a tricky hole, the beautiful landscapes, the rich history, the friendly competition, and the camaraderie with those who he played with. Anyone in this audience who played around with him would most definitely agree. I'll never play around without thinking of him. The second is my engineering degree. Grandpa was extremely proud of and engaged with all of his grandchildren, visiting us, attending our graduations, and taking us to lunch while home from college, as Megan said. He would always ask lots of questions about what we were up to. When I went off to college, I took some intro to engineering classes, thinking that I might want to be an engineer, since I liked math and science. Grandpa Jim was an engineer himself, and told me many times that engineering was so valuable because it taught you how to think. You could start with a set known of facts and you could find a solution. I heard that story many a times. I always loved that connection that I shared with him, though. I think I stuck with engineering in part because of his wise words and because I knew it would make him proud. The third thing is a canoe. We are so lucky that his 16 great grandchildren got to know him so well. As Megan said, they shared a lot of memories in the house and backyard that he was so proud of. In the last few years, in COVID times, we would bring lunch and the great grandkids would play in the sprinkler on the sand beach, go for a ride in the canoe he kept in the back garage, or sit with him watching the birds and the squirrels at his feeders. When he was moving out of his house on Fairmount this summer, that canoe felt like something that we shouldn't part with, since it reminded us of his lake and the time spent in his backyard. We now are the proud owners of that canoe. If anyone wants to borrow a canoe that has a tiny leak in it, I'm happy to lend it out. The fourth thing is my daughter's name. His wife Margie was the light of his life. You can see it in the pictures from when they were young, and you could hear it in the way he spoke about her, even after she passed. Saying things like, "We are so proud of you." Grandy is an iconic and saint-like figure in our family. Her legacy lives on through her recipes, her strawberry dishes that now live in our cupboards, and the advice that she passed along about how to care for a baby, as told by my mom. They were a great team, and as Megan said, they taught us what it means to build a lifelong partnership and a family with your spouse. When our daughter was born 4 months ago, we chose the name Margie in honor of her. The day before Grandpa died, he got to meet our Margie. For the rest of my life, when I say her name, I will think about Margie and Jim, the sweet love that they shared, and the life and legacy they created.
I'm already crying. Hi, I am Katie Helmuth, otherwise known as Catherine James Helmuth. I am daughter of Betsy and Ted Helmuth, and my 3 children are here. I was given a moment to speak at Grandy's funeral. I don't remember what I said, but I remember my last line. It was not in the script. It was off the cuff to cover myself as I broke apart at the podium. While speaking, I started crying. I paused, collected my thoughts, pointed my finger to the audience, and instructed, "Now don't cry," before exiting the stage. The only reason I remember my last line is because Grandpa remembered it. He recited that line to me almost as many times as he reminded me that I called his convertible the sweetness car. He liked that I choked up and couldn't finish talking. It touched him. Many years later, I realized I was wrong. Crying is good. We should cry. I shouldn't have told the people not to cry. Crying is a release. Sobbing is a release. Silently weeping, your shoulders, your stomach shaking, lets the grief move through you instead of staying stuck, toxifying in your muscles, blood, and skin. Whatever you are feeling for Grandpa, the loss, the what ifs, the love, the gratitude, the pride, the desire to do as he did, the wishing to know him better, all of it. I'm very glad to be here, celebrating his life. His body was that of a Scotsman on a battlefield who will not leave for love of his land. I am relieved for his release. He made a great impact on all of our lives, everyone in this room, and that will never go away.
Well, I'm the very lucky baby sister of three wonderful older brothers. Ham, who was 8 years older than I, Jim, 6 years older, and Bob, 2 years older. We lived on Fairmount Boulevard between Lander Circle and Sodom Center Road. And in my house, there were two rooms, Jim's room and the outdoors. In the summer, most days started in Jim's room, where Bob and I gathered to see what the plan of the day was. And on a rainy day, brought out Jim's enormous stash of soldiers, which we divided into 3 platoons, which were headed by 3 brigadier generals, Jim, Bob, and myself. Each platoon would battle the other until one would be the final victor. And when the signal was given, the war began. The sound of gunfire was throughout the room. Ring, zing, zing. And the brave warriors would slowly start up and climb up the sheer cliff, while the others would hide behind the ready-made bunkers, all provided by Jim's bedspread, the battlefield. Eventually, the battlefield was riddled with fallen soldiers. But as we were tallying up the results, all of a sudden, there was one that stood up. Jim's warrior said, "Thought you got me, eh?" And that would definitely make the soldiering go on for a long time. Now, these soldiers were actually made in Jim's bedroom. We had a toy machine that melted bricks of lead, which we then poured into the different molds of soldiers. A toy not only capable of producing brave soldiers, but serious burns as well as possible brain damage. I don't think FAO Schwartz still is carrying that particular item. On sunny days, we were outside most of the time. Most of that time was spent down damming up a creek that ran through the property. And we would dam that creek up and make a little tiny pond. And then we would make boats that we sailed and, of course, raced on the little pond. But I don't think we were very good at it because we were always repairing the dam. We built cement roads on a hill, intentionally intersecting them to create a grand collision. Some days it was off in the woods to swing on grapevines, just as like Tarzan. When the boys had had enough of their baby sister, they would drum up an excuse. "Oh, girl stuff. You can't do that thing. It's not for you." And at that point, I had what was called chili bones. And chili bones permeated a lot through our lives. Even Bob sometimes got chili bones. Later on in life, as we would encounter someone acting particularly poorly, we sort of look at the other and say, "I think maybe chili bones." Jim was a savior, just as our mother was. Mother actually would save string in all sorts of little bundles. She even ironed wrapping paper. Jim didn't do that. But Jim was our banker for Bob and myself. And if we ran out of a little cash, we'd go to Jim. He'd float us a loan with a little interest, of course. But one day, I caught him entering his vault. And there he was, screwdriver in hand, and um, ready to unscrew the plate of the light switch, and out would pop a bill. I do hope that you people, when you sold the house, checked the light switch, because I can guarantee you he had money in it. When I was in my early 50s, I had a very serious illness and was hospitalized. And Bob and Jim came to visit. They had the saddest faces imaginable. They definitely needed a little cheer. So I took my arm out of the covers and I went like this. And I said, "What you got, Mary?" And they laughed, and soon we all went on our way. Later on in life, Bob was ill, and I happened to stop by. And Libby was at her wits' end. She couldn't figure out what Bob wanted. And so I sat down next to him, and pretty soon there was this, and I said, "Oh, he wants a GI Joe." And Libby produced the GI Joe, which sat on the mantle thereafter. Then later in life, as we were married, I discovered that my brothers met for lunch. And so old me too asked if I couldn't be included. And well, what could they say? We had a wonderful first lunch until Jim said, "Get out your quarters." There was a bit of a pause. I certainly wondered what was going on, and the two boys kind of looked at each other. And then I realized they were flipping for the bill. And I said, "Oh, no, no, no. If you will all flip for the bill, we are still going to flip for the bill." So we did our flips and we did our spins, and I lost. As a matter of fact, I lost 3 more times. But I practiced my flips and my spins, and I never lost again. So to Jim, I have a little advice. I think that you'd best, it's, so my advice to you is that when you get there, I don't think maybe I'd try the chili bones. I don't think that works. And they are, "Don't you get me, eh?" That really doesn't apply. So just give a nice big smile. Treat them just the way you treat all your friends. You've had so many, and you'll do just fine. And give a little hug to Ham and Bob for me.
Dad spent over 90 years of his life living on Fairmount Boulevard. Initially in his father's colonial house that dated back to the late 1800s. Lore has it that he hunted pheasant back in the fields now known as Snowberry Lane before jumping on a school bus. When his father moved to the back cottage, Uncle Ham and Aunt Connie bought and built the property next door. Bob and Libby moved into the family home now owned by Mac and Kelly. Jim and Margie chose property a few doors down across the street, backing up on the country club's 16th hole. Biggarville officially became incorporated in the fall of 1960 when Friends erected a sign reading Biggarville population 18 and 7/9. Mac was on the way. Several years later, in the middle of a cocktail party, Jim and several friends hijacked a bulldozer to knock down a few trees and outline the start of a pond. The following Monday, the bulldozer owner found the relocated bulldozer and agreed to finish the job. Christened Bigger Lake, it was 11 feet deep and stocked with bass, bluegill, fish, but soon attracted other wildlife: frogs, turtles, snakes, deer, an occasional fox, a patient heron. On the shore, geese and a lone duck, believed to be the spirit of his mother. After the death of Grandpa Hamilton, a second duck flew over the funeral and joined his mate in the lake. The two ducks would often visit and stay a week or so with Jim as he met various life challenges. Their presence was often reassuring. On my last visit to the house, Dad and I counted over 30 species of birds and squirrels of the day. When he converted the house from oil heat to gas, he took the oil drums out and put them in the lake, and created a white wooden raft anchored in the middle of the lake. For 9 months out of the year, Jim's morning routine included throwing a towel on a tree limb and taking a running dive into the lake, swimming across it underwater and back. He showered outside the back door before visiting, before coming inside and dressing for work. With 4 kids and numerous cousins and friends, Jim's a vision of a bucolic backyard included volleyball, badminton, horseshoes, tetherball, a fire pit, a beach, a shallow end of the lake for younger swimmers. Hang 10, and there's even a picture of it on display, was an activity on the raft. He planted a hedgerow in the front yard, set back from the road, but due to some ball games, the glory of making a diving catch through the hedge saved a home run, and the hedge growth was quite uneven. Even the owner of the Cleveland Indians landed a helicopter to check in on the local talent. The cast of Up with People booked a stop in Biggerville and played several sets of music in exchange for a swim in the lake and a family barbecue. Betsy and Ted Helmuth were married there under the tent in the backyard. Early drawings included a dance floor on the raft that thankfully never materialized. Betsy, Ann, and Sally started a daycare for 3 to 5-year-olds using the lake and the old family tractor and wagon. Many in the neighborhood were all too happy to drop their kids off for the morning. A decade later, young Ham, involved in the Mad Hatter discotheque, and with aging cousins, many keg parties were to follow, along with Budman's truck one time. Activity in the lake was not limited to the summer. In the winter, when 3 to 4 inches of ice formed, Dad found an old water pump in a hose, and like the best Zambonis, pumped fresh water on top of the ice to form a very black glass slick ice top coat, ideal for hockey. So many friends and family played as kids grew out of skates like a bowling alley. The skates would be left behind for the next growing foot. New Year's parties involved skating, cocoa, and banana splits. Finally, with the purchase of a snowmobile came toboggan, sledding, and other winter sports. Looking back, it's easy to see how Jim chose to remain in Biggerville.
Hi. I wrote this out, but I don't know if I have the first page first. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Betsy Biggar Helmuth, the oldest with the younger brothers, the 3 younger brothers that you will hear today. My connection with Dad had very much to do with his communicating his love for finding his roots in Scotland. In 1968, Mom and Dad were traveling and had decided to stay at Glen Eagles, a 63-hole golf club established in 1919 in the center of Scotland with many well-respected courses. Dad was obviously there for the golf, and Mom was certainly there for the poached salmon with chilled cucumber sauce. But Dad had a bigger vision, a bigger mission while being there, to find his Scottish family, where the Hamilton Biggars had had their origin. I refer to a letter that my cousin, our cousin, Judy Biggar McGowan in Scotland, wrote just after Dad died. She remembers a call that Dad had made. He had not found any Biggars in Biggar, Scotland. So he resorted to the phone book and he found his name, James Biggar. He decided to start there. So, as Judy tells it, the phone rang. Let's see, so let's find this page. The phone rang. Donald Biggar answered. He would be my age, and he came into the room to tell his dad that somebody was on the phone asking for James Biggar. So he said to his dad, so Donald answered the phone and he told his dad, there's a James Biggar wants to speak to you. Judy writes that Dad told me he spoke to the guy for 10 minutes and he sounded okay. And he was staying at Glen Eagles, so must have had a bean or two. So I said to him, you'd better come on down and see what we look like. And the rest is history. As Judy says, Dad and her dad got on so well, they could have been brothers. And that connection seemed to radiate right across both of our wider families. And both of them passed away aged 93. They were about 10 years apart. It's hard to believe. And when we saw pictures of James's father, he reminded us a lot of our Hamilton Biggar, our grandfather. So we definitely were related. Now, Dad brought home, boy, I'm going off script here, I can tell. Dad brought home the official that we were on the charts. We descended from Herbert Biggar from the 1600s. And there were many pages to the geological charts. Dad was introduced to the aunties who lived together, Annie, Effie, and Gertrude, and they were in charge of all the geological records. So Mom and Dad were there in 1998, and 30 years later, when their youngest grandchild turned 4, and you know who you are, Mom and Dad made it their goal to take all of us, and I think we were 21 at that point, over to Scotland to meet our relatives. So let's see. So Mom and Dad hired Henry, the bus driver, who got to know us all very well and was a very comical guy to be with. And he had a big long bus, and we could play many games, and we could sleep comfortably and fall asleep and bother each other. And Mom and Dad chose to take the car in the back, but they took turns. So it really was a dream come true for all of us. Mom had a tear in her eye as she counted her blessings that all of us were somehow able to set aside 2 weeks away from work, away from home, to be together to discover Scotland together. At that time, the grandchildren, the 11 grandchildren, were ranging in age from 4 to 21. So it is amazing. And mom and dad were 70. Is that right? 70. I think so. Yes, that's definitely what they were. And so, so Judy remembers, she'll never forget the first Scottish Biggar she was the first Scottish visit coming this way across the pond. And what a welcome she got. Mom and dad were so good to her, met the whole clan, a tour of Stofers, and so much more. And then various gatherings and parties this side of the pond. They even we had visited their cemetery, the Iron Gray Cemetery, where their relatives are buried. And we recognized many names that we carried through the years. Dad took them to our Lakeview Cemetery to show the heritage we had here in Cleveland, Ohio. 2 days after reading Judy's wonderful reply to my announcement of that our dad had died, and she gave such a nice remembrance of the wonderful time she had, we received an email from Judy's daughter, Claire, who is Katie's age, and that her mom had very suddenly had passed from a cardiac arrest. She was fully healthy. She was counting the herds. She was counting the health of all the cattle they had in their yards, and it was very sudden. So, and very devastating for the Scottish Biggars to lose Judy from out of the blue. And I, of course, miss her too. That trip meant a lot to us. We arrived for the annual tattoo in Edinburgh Castle. We visited James Biggar's lovely pastures of cattle, and his home was called Chapelton, which Dad later named one of the streets after, out at Glencairn. Both the James Biggars arranged for a full attendance of descendants from Herbert Biggar. James Biggar of Scotland was determined to bring at least 21 from his side. In Scotland, they both had a little competitive edge. So that was a banquet representing 3 generations, meeting one another for the first time, and that was almost 25 years ago. Let's see. My daughter Kimmy, our daughter Kimmy, had given me a little book that sat on Dad's breakfast table, and many things that sat on Dad's breakfast table stayed there year after year after year. And we noticed when we picked that up that he had turned over certain pages and he had underlined certain sayings, and these were sayings of a Scottish dad. And a few of them he starred, and a few of them were kind of silly, and a few of them had to do with being a good Scottish dad. I'll read a few and then I'll stop. The problem with getting wiser is you have to get older at the same time. Folks may doubt what you say, but they always believe what you do. Life's like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. If you're not in front, then the scenery never changes. Another one was the sun always shines on a Saturday. And I think he made that true many times. He who finds no fault in himself needs a second opinion. Edinburgh's big, but Biggar is bigger. he gave this to Ted. He had Ted's name in the margin. A father's advice is like castor oil, easy to give, but awful to take. And this refers to gaining success into life. Honesty is a trail. Once you get off it, you're lost. And this one, before you are a has-been, you have to have been a something to start with. And then Dad wrote in another stanza, avoid being a never will be. If you're afraid to go too far, you'll never go far enough. There was another chapter that talked about when we were annoying to Dad, and he had nothing underlined that. We rarely annoyed Dad. The last one is growing up. A father is neither an anchor to hold us back, nor a sail to take us there, but a guiding light to show us the way. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Just two more. Good afternoon. Dad was always positive and full of energy. We thought he would live forever. We knew better, but at least for me, I had not come to terms with that reality even in the final week. Dad covered a lot of ground in his nearly 94 years, and we were all better for that. Dad believed in family solidarity, having fun together, and loyalty to one another above all else. That was our religion, our guidepost. He and Mom had many friends, but they put the family first, no matter what. That notion built stability, a sense of peace for each of us, whether we remained in Cleveland or moved elsewhere. Not everyone finds that at home, but we were very fortunate. And during the 14 years I worked for Stouffer Hotels, Dad was CEO of the Stouffer Corporation and later the Nestle USA parent company. I made note that what we were taught at home was not that different than at the office. I worked in many hotels across the country and observed Dad as a leader at company management meetings. His positive disposition certainly charged the audience, but he always included little nuggets of advice that could be applied in any hotel or business. I would like to share a few examples with you that come to my mind. The core values he learned at home were consistent with those established many years prior by Vernon, Gordon, and their parents. Everybody is somebody was a common phrase within the company. Stouffers worked hard to treat all associates as extensions of the family. As early as 1922, when that was not the norm, high performance could be reached with everyone working together. More common in American business today, but exceptional at the time. Stouffers was a natural fit for Dad. You have probably heard the phrase, trust must be earned. Dad granted trust. Oh. Dad granted trust automatically. He did not wait for it to be earned. He allowed his leaders, this allowed his leaders, employees, relationships to flourish and grow in a high trust, low stress environment. With training and development, he relied on everyone to do their part. In a hotel, the housekeeper, front desk agent, or the general manager, everybody's role is critical. People perform better when trusted. They hold themselves accountable. Everybody is respected. While trust was granted automatically, a family or company's reputation was earned over decades, but, but is fragile and can be ruined in minutes. He emphasized we had a family reputation to uphold. I must say, This was a heavy burden when we were young, but we did our best. Fortunately, we were not taking selfies back then. Our stories didn't get out. You'll have to come to Thanksgiving dinner or a fondue and wine night to hear the wild testimony. At Stouffer's, Dad referred to himself as a quality nut. He believed that quality of product and service should never be compromised. At company meetings, he would talk about the big salami theory of quality, how a butcher could cut a small slice from his prized salami, believing his customers would not notice the difference. But over time, small slice after slice, the value would decline and no longer be any different from his competitor. It was a warning that making less expensive ingredient substitutions, product or service modifications, had risks not immediately apparent. Dad had a concept he referred to as building and protecting a defendable fort. Essentially, concentrate the company's manpower and capital on the core business and make sure that it is satisfied before engaging in anything else. A warning to the overly ambitious among us who spread resources too thin and lose focus on what is important. Identification of and protection of your defendable fort was always to come first. When negotiating, Dad also taught us to consider the other side's point of view in advance and anticipate their natural, probable response. A good deal must include compromise. Total defeat is difficult for anyone to accept. So even when you are right, you should yield something to your adversary. You want them to feel good about the outcome so you can do business with them again with a clear conscience. At home, he insisted his children will agree. And we do have different points of view, but we reach agreeable accommodation. Dad had also had a formula for success. Essentially, it was first, follow a plan, apply common sense to daily issues, assume initiative and responsibility, and over time you will generate many bucks for you and the company. Within that formula, assumed responsibility and initiative, I always felt was his most emphasized and rewarded by my father. He loved leaders that could move the ball forward and make positive things happen for the good of the company. Dad was super competitive with an inner drive to overcome hurdles. On paper, Dad's career looks very smooth, but he faced many challenges along the way. During critical times, he exhibited calm and courage when it counted. Perhaps his most difficult period was holding the Stouffer Foods team together during the 5-year period the company was owned by conglomerate Litton Industries. Micromanagement by the parent company was stifling, and there was a major culture clash. Vernon Stouffer was even called to the Beverly Hills headquarters, charged with behavior unbecoming of a company officer. Apparently, he had taken a swing at one of the Litton executives responsible for Stouffer's. But Dad could be persuasive, and it was the Litton executive that was reassigned. Eventually, Dad convinced Litton to sell the company. Fortunately for Dad and the company, the buyer was Nestle, and thus began a wonderful relationship that started nearly 50 years ago. In full disclosure, you should know that Dad could also be stubborn, persistent, and determined, and didn't allow inconvenient facts to get in the way of meeting his objectives. He was a big picture guy that avoided getting bogged down in detail and could rally others to achieve the possible. At age 63, when he retired from Nestle, he embarked on a new career that would cover the next 25 years. He envisioned and developed the Glencairn Forest residential community bordering the Cuyahoga Valley National Park in Richfield, which is clearly one of the finest residential areas in Northeast Ohio. This project and the adjacent corporate office park, Kinross Lakes, were not easy and challenged him every bit of the way. He was like a dog with a bone, and he was not about to let it go. At great personal expense, he stayed with the projects through three recessions, including the Great Recession and housing bust. Some might have walked away, but he paid off the loans and just kept at it until the project was complete. Throughout, he held true to his vision that quality can never be compromised. That's who he was, and we are proud of him as we drive through the developments today. By the way, Dad, ever the salesman, would be disappointed in me if I did not mention that 2 residential lots and 1 office lot remain available. Contact me or one of my siblings if you are interested. As these stories illustrate, Dad led by example. As a father and a corporate leader, he kept things simple, but always focused on trust and integrity. As a corporate leader, father, uncle, grandfather, and great grandfather, he was a developer of people and mentor whose lessons will forever remain with us. Lastly, our family appreciates the sentiments received, written or spoken, of how Dad impacted their life or career or just made their day a little bit brighter. Dad was positive, thoughtful, kind, and inspirational leader. Thank you for being here today.
Good afternoon. Family. Dad used to define family as your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, and all those additional people you choose to include. So looking out at the sea of faces today and acknowledging the individuals in the first 4 rows, I fully understand Dad's definition of family. You are all family to us. First, a housekeeping item. We'll turn on the microphone soon. The good news is that I'm the last family speaker. And then we'll close the program with Gloria Cheney. Our family's honored to all of the guests who have joined us here today and all those online participants who wish to pay tribute to Dad and so we invite you here after the service to go in the rooms to the left here, and we'll have a drink and a little food and toast in his honor. But before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge with incredible gratitude to all of our spouses, our kids, our grandkids, relatives, friends, for all their support and assistance that they've given us these last 8 months. Thank you very much to all of you. In addition, we'd like to acknowledge the help and support that Dad had and he received from 2 memory care facilities. First is Arden Court. The second is the Lantern in Bainbridge, and their great care for Dad in these past 8 months. And finally, we'd like to personally thank 2 key individuals who were caregivers, Dave and Dee Dee, who really helped Dad stay in his own home for as long as he did. So we're really grateful to all of those people. So what can I possibly say and add to the wonderful comments that everybody's had today regarding Dad's life that you haven't read in the program, the obituary, or heard today? As many have said, Dad had a great run, large, close, loving family, important education in grade school, high school, and college. Great career with Stouffer's and Nestle. Important board contributions. Major devotion and work to better his community. Great lifelong friends, many of who are in this room. And a second 28-year career developing the corporate office park and the several hundred homes in a nature preserve community that Jim talked about. As a family, the 4 kids feel nothing but total gratitude. As Megan said earlier, I'm not sad that he is gone. I'm just glad that he lived. So I was thinking about the theme of my talk today, and it came to me in pillows. That's right, pillows. The first is life is a game, but golf is serious. The second is golf is not a matter of life or death. It's more important than that. Now, golf is a gentleman's game. It originated in the 15th century on the eastern coast of Scotland. A lot of the places that Betsy talked about. But Dad used the game of golf to share laughter, to build lasting friendships, to teach life's lessons, and to enjoy friendly competition. To put it bluntly, golf was very important to Dad. Dad was a member of this club for the last 62 years and spent nearly 90 years, as David said, living on Fairmount Boulevard, just parallel to the 16th hole. Right behind this beautiful course is the Pepper Pike Club. As a youngster, at age 11 to 14, he would ride his bike up and become a caddy. He joined the club 49 years ago, the Pepper Pike Club, and he became president of the club at age 68. So it's pretty rare, the caddy who went on to become the club president. People ask me, Bill, who's your golf foursome of life? And I would have to answer many family members and my closest friends. But by my count, I think I probably played nearly 1,000 times with Dad. Admittedly, 80% of those times it started with a wink of the eye, a nod to the left. And it was after dinner and we were out the door running past the lake. We were allowed 3 clubs, 2 balls, a couple of tees, and we were just trying to beat the sunset. But let me give you a few highlights of his golf. Some players keep track of their lowest score of all time. Dad kept track of his magic number, the difference between his age and his lowest number. He started tracking this kind of in his 70s and 80s. One summer day, he made a putt on the 18th hole. It was a putt that broke 8 feet to the right. It was from 35 feet away, and he had just scored a 79, and he was 80 years old. His new magic number was now 1 under. He shot his perfect round with no mulligans that day. The second story is that the National Registry of Holes in Ones calls the odds of making a hole in one 1 in 12,500. Most people never get one in a lifetime. Dad's first hole in one came playing with Mom. He was in North Carolina and he was in his 50s. His second hole in one came in Georgia when he was in his 60s. His third hole in one came playing with his grandson Will, me, Ryan. Where's Ryan? Ryan. And that was his third, and he was in his 70s. His fourth hole in one came playing with his son David, playing in Napa Valley. His last shot of Dad's 2016 Thanksgiving trip, and he was 1 week shy of his 88th birthday. His final hole in one came the very next round. He was playing at a family wedding outing in Florida, Brad and Kylie's wedding. And he was playing with my brother Jim, David, and he was 88 years old. It was 14 holes from the last time he made a hole in one. It's tough to make these things up. But my final golf story comes from the West Coast. His favorite golf course of all time, the Cypress Point Club. It's located on Monterey Peninsula. His favorite holes on the course were 15, 16, and 17. These three holes make up 712 yards of the most beautiful holes in the world. After teeing off the 17th tee, and you'll see the picture of 16 in the top of the tee in the other room, Dad would always stroll to the right of the tee, and he read a very, very small plaque that was buried in the ground. The plaque was surrounded by the California ice plant. The plaque read, and I quote, "Gentlemen, I suggest we pause for a moment, admire the beautiful view, count our blessings. Very few of us are privileged to pass this way." Dad read this plaque every time he played the course, those holes at Cypress Point. The plaque said it all. Those 25 words captured the essence of his golf game, his friends, his travels, his company, his family, and his life. I'll read it again. Gentlemen, I suggest we pause for a moment, admire the beautiful view, count our blessings. Very few of us are privileged to pass this way. I now understand why It's a Wonderful Life is my favorite movie of all time. The movie was released in 1946, coincidentally, Dad's senior year of high school. The movie is about the life of George Bailey, who goes through a personal crisis. Dad's life went through several difficult times, but few people were aware of them. George Bailey, played by Jimmy Stewart, fell in love with the popular Mary, played by Donna Reed. Throughout the movie, George Bailey's reminded about the importance of family, love, and friendship. Clearly, Mom was our Donna Reed. She was beautiful. She raised 4 kids while Dad was busy working. She was always thinking of others, and she was loved by all. But the movie story is about a man who dreams about building long bridges and tall skyscrapers and seeing the world. But instead, he becomes dedicated to his company, his town, his friends, and his family. This movie story is Dad's story. It's an average man who goes on to live an extraordinary life. And his connection with people and the way he changed many people's lives. There are countless parallels of Dad's life in this movie. Dad's life touched many people. The film concludes with the entire cast of friends who he touched in his life. And they all get together and they come back to celebrate the amazing life of George Bailey. It's not hard to think of Dad when watching the movie. On October 28th, 2 months ago, and when I say that, today's December 29th, and Betsy would want me to remind you that this would be their 72nd wedding anniversary, Mom and Dad. And at their anniversary, they had the same poinsettias up here. And so we're very fortunate. But on October 28th, 2 months ago, Dad took his last breath, and as you heard, surrounded by family. 10 days later, at our Blue Coats dinner, Gloria mentioned that we honored him. Dad was a member of the Blue Coats organization for 66 years, and he was a board member for years. There are many Blue Coats members here tonight. We're honored for his service to Blue Coats and for being the last surviving member of the original group 66 years ago. For those that are curious, Blue Coats is an organization devoted to the well-being of the families of Cuyahoga County Safety Forces, police, fire, and EMS who have lost their lives in the line of duty, and Dad was a very devoted member. For that reason, our family is truly honored to have Gloria Cheney here. She's the chaplain, as she mentioned, of the Cleveland Police, Cleveland FBI, and the chaplain of Blue Coats. And she's going to close the ceremony, and then we'll have the reception out here. Gloria, can I have you come up?
I want to tell you a quick story and encourage you. Gonna pray and get out of here. If you were in church, you're supposed to say amen. Amen. I have a lovely granddaughter named Kayla. And every summer, Kayla would come home to visit me. She was living in Texas at the time. And Kayla would come to visit me. At the end of the summer, I would have to take Kayla to the airport. And back then, you could still get to the window, at least watch them off. And Kayla would get on that plane, and I would watch that plane take off, family, and I would cry because Kayla was leaving. But then I remembered that her mom and her dad were in Texas. And so somebody was there to meet that plane. May I suggest that my friend, when he left, they met him. I'm a pastor and I have to have a sanctified imagination to get through this kind of stuff. So I believe there were some angels and your mom that met him. And they probably said, hey, and welcome. So how do you make it through now, family? How all 4 rows of you and everybody, how you live, you laugh, and you love. Go ahead, tell somebody near you right now, live, laugh, and love. Go ahead and tell them. See, that's the first time you were able to talk all afternoon, eh? Amen. Amen. So we have gracefully reached the conclusion, the moment of this time of this celebration of life. A phenomenal husband, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, uncle, colleague, and friend. One more time, allow me to offer you comfort from John O'Donohue. These closing stanzas honor the grief of losing someone so dear to the heart while celebrating the memory of a vibrant life well lived. And on behalf of this wonderful family, for all of you that are here, know that your love will sustain them for the rest of their days. Donahue says, though we need to weep your loss, you dwell in the safe place in our hearts, where no storm of night or pain can reach you. He continues, your love was like that dawn brightening ever our lives, awakening beneath the dark. A further adventure of color, the sound of your voice found for us a new music that brightened everything. Whatever you enfolded in your gaze quickened into the joy of being. You placed smiles like flowers on the altar of the heart. He sure did. Your mind always sparkled with wonder at things. Though your days were too brief, your spirit was live, awake, and complete. Donahue continues, he says, we look forward towards each other no longer for the old distance of our names as you dwell in the rhythm of breath as close to us as we are to ourselves. He says, though we cannot see you with outward eyes, we know our soul's gaze is upon your face, smiling back at us from with everything to which we bring our best refinement. He continues, let us not look for only you in memory, where we would grow lonely without you. You would want us to find in you presence beside us when beauty brightens, when kindness glows, and music echoes eternal tones. When orchids brighten the earth, darkest winter has turned to spring. May this dark grief flower with hope in every heart that loved you. May you, my friend, continue to inspire us, Donahue says, to enter each day with a generous heart, to serve the call of courage and love. All of you talked about it. Until we see your wonderful face again in the land where there is no more separation, where all tears shall be wiped from our mind, and where, wow, we will never lose you again. Now, my brothers and sisters, we leave from this place with our prayer that we never leave from the presence of God. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rains fall soft upon your fields until we meet again. May God hold you in the palm of his hand. Will you pray with me? The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up his countenance upon us and give us peace this day and forevermore. And the people of God said, amen.